UBS to buy Credit Suisse for nearly $3.25 billion US dollars. And locally, a bus crash on Chin Chung Road leaves more than 70 people injured. Russian President Vladimir Putin will expect President Xi Jinping to show solidarity against Western attempts to police the world when they meet in Moscow. Days after Putin was charged with war crimes by the International Criminal Court, he sees Xi's visit as a symbol of support by a major country. Xi is aiming to showcase China as a peacemaker in Russia's war with Ukraine. But analysts expect him to avoid giving Moscow too many promises amid the threat of Western sanctions. Nazvi Karim reports.
Xi Jinping, the statesman, the peace broker, and the calming influence in a world full of chaos. That's the picture the president is hoping to paint when he pays a visit to Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow during a 3-day trip starting today. He is also making a statement to the United States and its Western allies that two powerful countries are working together, though Beijing has publicly remained neutral in Russia's conflict with Ukraine and has refused to condemn Putin's action. In an article he wrote for the Russian government's Rossiyskaya Gazeta ahead of his trip to Moscow, Xi highlighted the forging of closer ties between the two countries over the past decade. He says Sino-Russian ties, based on mutual trust and a multi-tiered cooperation framework, offers a global model for major country relations. China last month released a 12-point plan to end the war in Ukraine, which Xi said reflects world views and involves all parties embracing the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative and sustainable security, along with results-oriented dialogue. Xi admits, though, that the ultimate solution is not easy. The president is walking a political tightrope in the shadow of tense Sino-US relations.
They do want to affirm the strategic partnership with the Russian Federation to show that America's attempts to split the relationship and make the relationship costly for China will not work. They want to avoid economic and reputational costs in Europe, so I think that they will be careful about how far they go in terms of signaling new support for Russia so that they're not seen as an enabler.
China doesn't want to face U.S. sanctions, which would automatically go into effect if they were to provide lethal aid to Moscow. It's quite clear that Chinese companies have avoided doing that.
Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
The spokesman for Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow considers any decision by the International Criminal Court as legally void. Dmitry Peskov was responding to reporters who asked for comments after Germany's justice minister said Putin would be arrested if he travels to Germany. Putin's response to the ICC move was to make a casual visit to the city of Mariupol in the occupied Donetsk region. There, he spoke to residents about their living quarters, visited one of the units, and took complaints about the late payment of salaries. Peskov said Russia does and will do what it thinks answers its interests. Meanwhile, Serbian leader Aleksandar Vučić, an ally of Putin, said the ICC decision would only prolong the war. He said the decision would have negative legal consequences and increase Moscow's reluctance to enter peace talks. Banking giant UBS is buying troubled rival Credit Suisse for almost $3.25 billion US dollars. It's a deal orchestrated by regulators to stave off further market-shaking turmoil in the global banking system. Daniel Rao tells us more.
As the agreement was being brokered, Swiss authorities had urged UBS to take over its smaller rival after a plan for Credit Suisse to borrow up to 50 billion Swiss francs, or about $54 billion US dollars, failed to reassure investors and the bank's customers. The Swiss government is providing more than 100 billion Swiss francs to support the takeover. Credit Suisse is among 30 financial institutions known as globally systemically important banks. Authorities expressed concern about the potential fallout if it would fail. The deal follows the collapse of two large US banks last week that spurred a frantic broad response from Washington to prevent further panic. Swiss President Alain Berset heralded the deal as it was announced on Sunday night. He called it a very far-reaching announcement for private individuals, businesses that need this liquidity and access to the banking system, and one of great breadth for the stability of international finance. Switzerland's executive branch, a 7-member governing body that includes Berset, passed an emergency ordinance allowing the merger to go through without shareholder approval. Colin Kelleher, the UBS chairman, hailed enormous opportunities from the takeover and highlighted his bank's conservative risk culture. He said the combined group would create a wealth manager with over $5 trillion in total invested assets, but said Credit Suisse's investment banking operations would be significantly downsized.
Let me be very specific on this. UBS intends to downsize Credit Suisse's investment banking business and align it with our conservative risk culture. It is intended that the combined investment banking businesses will over time account for no more than 25% of the group's risk-weighted assets. UBS's strength and our familiarity with Credit Suisse's business puts us in a unique position to execute this integration efficiently and effectively with Swiss and international clients' best interest in mind.
Following news of the Swiss deal, the world's central banks announced coordinated moves to stabilize banks. These included allowing access to a lending facility for banks to borrow US dollars if they need them, a practice widely used during the 2008 financial crisis. Daniel Rell, TVB News.
9 Chinese nationals were reported killed in an attack by militants on a gold mine outside the Central African Republic's capital, Bangui. The Chinese embassy in the country has urged its citizens to avoid traveling outside the capital after the attack on the Chinese-operated Chimbolo gold mine. President Xi Jinping condemned the attack. He called for severe punishment for the killers and said the safety of Chinese citizens must be ensured. The attack comes just days after gunmen kidnapped 3 Chinese nationals in the west of the Central African Republic. No one has yet to claim responsibility, but suspicion fell on the coalition of Patriots for Change, aligned with former President Francois Bozize. Back here at home, a bus crash on Ching Chung Road near Lai Chi Kok Park this morning left 77 people injured. 44 of them were sent to hospital for treatment. The accident caused a traffic snarl-up that lasted for hours. Police arrested the 54-year-old bus driver on suspicion of dangerous driving. Timothy Lee tells us more.
The damaged Kowloon motor bus double-decker could be seen on the verge of tipping over to the right. More than 50 passengers were trapped on the top deck, waiting for fire services personnel to come to their rescue. After firefighters secured the double-decker in place, the passengers were let out one by one, many of them being elderly people. Several of them also sustained injuries to the head. And a few were carried away on stretchers. It was badly damaged. This passenger said the crash seemed to come out of nowhere, adding that another passenger sitting at the back of the bus was thrown out of the seat. This passenger expected the driver to swerve around the barrier before crashing straight into it. Her main concern was that the bus might topple after tilting to the right, and urged everyone on board to stay calm. Firefighters noted the risk of the vehicle falling to its side and quickly fastened the bus to its position to prevent any further movement. Fire Services Lai Chi Kok Station Commander Leung Kin Ming stressed that his team's priority was to attend to trapped passengers and reminded them to stay still in order not to affect the bus's balance, citing that a more than 28-degree tilt could lead to the vehicle falling over. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers said the tilt of the crashed bus was nowhere close to the limit, adding that it would not have been dangerous for passengers to move around. Police arrested the driver on suspicion of dangerous driving. They are investigating the cause of the incident, including the speed of the bus at the time of the crash and the mental state of the driver. A section of Chingcheng Road leading to Kwaicheng was sealed off by authorities due to the incident. The road was reopened to traffic at 2:40 this afternoon. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
A migrant worker group protested against the government's proposal to tighten regulations with the aim of preventing foreign domestic helpers from changing employers mid-contract. But an employer representative said the amendment would plug the loophole that has allowed such malpractices. Jackie Lin with more.
We are workers, we are not slaves.
Decrying injustice against the Labor Department today was the Asian Migrants Coordinating Body.
We will not initiate any job hopping. We will not do that. Even if we bear verbal abuses or sometimes physical abuses, we continue the work because we don't want to lose the job. It's basically a human rights to change an employment. It's not bad to look for a better working condition.
Under the government's proposal, employment agencies would explain to domestic helpers that applications to change employers within their 2-year contract period would only be approved under exceptional circumstances. They include proven instances of abuse or exploitation and early termination by employers because of immigration and financial issues. When hired by a new employer, the helper should leave the city and reapply for a work visa. If evidence showed the helpers had hopped between jobs, they will be denied a work visa. But what exactly constitutes job hopping? Thomas Chan, chairman of the Hong Kong Union of Employment Agencies, said authorities tend to side with the employers when handling conflicts between the helpers and the employers. So the government should set up a committee comprised of representatives from migrant workers, employment agencies, and employers to vet various alleged cases of job hopping. Betty Yong, who chairs the Hong Kong Employers of Overseas Domestic Helpers Association, said it's very unfair to employers if helpers are allowed to switch jobs just 2 months after they sign contract. That's because the original owner shouldered not just the helper's monthly wage, but also their flight tickets or some agency fees that could amount to $20,000. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Still ahead, new charges of terrorism and other offenses filed against former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan. A rise in theft cases in the city in the first 2 months of the year. The M Plus Museum receives donations from an overseas architecture firm. Welcome back. In Pakistan, police have filed new charges against former Prime Minister Imran Khan, as well as 17 of his aides and scores of his supporters. They are accused of terrorism and other offenses after the ousted premier's followers clashed with security forces in Islamabad Saturday. Tracy Furness has more.
For hours, Khan's followers clashed with police Saturday outside a court where the former Prime Minister was to appear in a graft case. Khan was unable to physically enter the courtroom due to the chaos and was allowed by the judge to sign his presence from his vehicle. Riot police wielded batons and fired tear gas while Khan supporters threw firebombs and hurled rocks at officers. More than 50 officers were injured, and at a police checkpoint, several cars and motorcycles were torched. Police said 59 of Khan's supporters were arrested during the violence. Khan spoke out Sunday saying the police were provoking his supporters and they had to react. He said that if he didn't get out of the car quickly, there would have been more bloodshed. He also said that the police were isolating him. Their plan is to murder me, I am clear of that. Besides Khan, the case filed Sunday also made accusations against former and current lawmakers, former ministers, a former National Assembly Speaker and scores of Khan's supporters. The charges include terrorism, obstructing police officers in carrying out their duty, attacks on police, wounding officers and threatening their lives. The 70-year-old former cricket star turned Islamist politician was ousted as Pakistan's Prime Minister in a no-confidence vote in Parliament last April. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Back here in Hong Kong, police say the number of theft cases went up by almost 40% between January and February this year. The police believe the increase was linked to the city's return to normalcy after the pandemic. Mimo Sung-ai tells us more.
Nowadays, more people can be seen on Hong Kong streets as business activities return to normal. However, the public should be more cautious with their belongings when they are outside and in shops to reduce the risk of being robbed or pickpocketed. The police said 3,341 cases of theft were reported in the first 2 months of the year, a 37% rise from the same period last year. Among them, pickpocketing recorded the biggest increase, 96%. This was followed by miscellaneous thefts and shoplifting, with an increase of 46% and 35% respectively. Why was there an upward trend in theft cases? The police believed it was due to some people's desire for quick cash amid the city's return to normalcy.
Hong Kong is gradually getting resumed to the normal paces. So, and the influence of pandemic is getting weaker now. So it might be one of the very important reasons why the theft case is more. We call this type of theft case is a quick cash crime. So it is easy. It is an easy way out, and then it also gave the opportunist some way to get their income.
Authorities have advised shop owners to attach anti-theft labels to their products, preferably in an obscure place where criminals cannot easily tear them away. Shops can also install security cameras with high-resolution recording functions. While some theft cases were one person doing, some were organized by crime syndicates. Senior Inspector Yuan Te-ho of the anti-triad section of Sam Sui Po district said the police had cracked down on a Vietnamese criminal group that focused on shoplifting at supermarkets and large chain stores. Yuan added the group would then sell the stolen items online at lower prices.
The police urged the public to avoid buying goods from unknown sources,
or if they are unusually cheap. Otherwise, there could be legal consequences. Mimo Sung-ai, TVB News.
On a more positive note, the M+ Museum has received donations from an overseas architecture firm, including a section model and various process materials from its key projects in Asia and beyond. The exhibition will run until June next year. Furthermore, the current SIG collection exhibition will feature new display items from September. Sakura Ip reports.
The crisscross of structural steel framing is a signature design of the Beijing National Stadium, commonly known as the Bird's Nest. The section model in a 1:150 ratio was donated by a renowned Swiss architecture firm to become one of the newest items on display at the M+ Museum. The firm will later donate various process materials from its key projects in Asia and beyond.
We are very keen to have this the bird nest model because it's one of the very major projects symbolize the China's building boom from early 2000s. So they were like homage to from the Chinese culture, and then how they translate it, and then how make it to the contemporary building for civic use.
M+ also announced the 6 artists shortlisted for the second edition of the SIG Prize. They are from Hong Kong and the mainland. Meanwhile, the museum is also preparing the SIG collection's new exhibition. A previously exhibited item had faced accusation of violating the national security law. But will there be any concerns about such accusations while curating the upcoming exhibition?
The curatorial integrity is absolutely intact. This is researched content. It's very finely curated. I'm very proud of it.
The shortlisted artists of SIG Prize 2023 will present their work in exhibition in coming September until February next year. Also, the current SIG Collection exhibition will roll out a new set of selection in September until 2025.
As the M+ Museum's entry fee costs more than $100, could any discounts or promotions be on offer to attract tourists? M+ said prices will be based on the cost of each exhibition. Sakura Ip, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Pearl Magazine is up shortly. See you then.